Now all of a sudden, like,
Hey, Michael.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell Tracy we're live.
Tracy, we're live.
Here we go. It's a lively meeting this evening. We have lots of guests this evening. All right, and everyone is here. This is really cool. All right, it is time to begin our meeting this evening. It is 6:32 and present this evening. I'm going to start right from here tonight. Patrick's here.
Woo!
I feel like we're in
Patrick's in the
daycare.
house.
Patrick's here. Mike Roth is here. Craig Schulte is present. Aaron Carlson, Ben Peters, myself, and I remember to look left. Michael Gary.
Very good.
We have a full audience here, and Chris Hood, and I believe Kim is with us as well. And anyone else online? Is that it tonight?
That's it.
All right, very good. Open forum. Is anyone here outside of one of our agenda items this evening? All is quiet. All right. We almost need more chairs. All right, going on on that. The consent agenda. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at our meeting minutes, go over the bills?
Do we need to add this bill, Trace?
Pardon me?
We need to add that one? Okay. So
Okay,
I would
well-
make a motion to add that bill
The invoice.
invoice.
what is the bill?
Let's see. It is for,
It's a big one.
it's a lot.
Oh, is that repairing that one?
That Kate, I don't have a copy of it.
Alyssa just gave it to me last minute, so.
It's water nodes
Go.
for our water meters to be AMI.
Oh, the water meters.
Okay, got it. So
Okay.
that, I would like to add that to the consent agenda.
Anyone like to second that?
I would second adding this to the consent agenda.
All right. I'm going to say any more discussion, but I think we were good with that then.
Okay.
Everyone in favor on that one?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. And bills we're good with?
Yeah, that was.
All right,
wasn't that
anything else?
included?
We
Yeah.
had a beer and wine application for the new owners of the Angry Trout.
Yeah.
And then the stormwater plan, which we had
Yeah.
reviewed before, so we're all good? Okay, would anyone like to make, on the revised consent agenda, motion on that?
I'd make that motion.
I would just add that I did find today on AED on these defibrillators, there's a $600 rebate per defibrillator, good through tomorrow. So I let the powers that be know that.
Great.
Kim,
So
that
yeah.
power that should be?
That's the power that be, yeah.
So
Great.
Got it.
it'll be
Cool,
$7,200 less than that.
nice, way to
Ben,
go.
Good job, Ben.
You buying Dairy
It's my
Queens then?
full salary plus.
Yeah. That's true. All right, very good. Anything else?
Now we can afford them.
Make or break. All right, motion on this?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Oh, we did that.
We moved.
We had our
Second.
We seconded.
discussion.
We discussed.
All
And
right.
now,
Now,
Vote.
lost track already. We, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Quiet. All right, we're good to go on that. Next up, right on time, North House. We're on track, 6:35. Go, Greg.
Okay, I think this can be quick and easy, I hope. So I'm here to, as part of our submitting our land use permit, our application, Mike's done a great job of working us through questions that he had and he wanted addressed, whether it was, that elevator sticking out of the roof, make it a little lower. So we found a little more expensive, little lower solution, Hey, where do the utilities go? So we worked on that. And one thing that he brought up is, when you're digging, there's a zero setback here, probably means you're going to be moving dirt on the city's property, and our lease says very clearly, when you're moving things around on the city's property, you ought to be a good neighbor and come over and say hi, and we're moving some dirt on your property. So that's essentially what we're here to confirm and request affirmation of, move on forward. So, but I'm here for questions. And I don't know if you'd add anything about our work getting us here? Okay.
Yeah, because you're just going to have new grading when this gets done? Is that
Yeah,
part of
because,
it?
you know, one, because of the positioning of the wall and because it's beach gravel, it's hard to dig a straight line down. But two, that area in between the back of the yellow house and the milling shop, which is to its south, I don't know if everybody remembers, but it's got a little grade. You're walking along and it's slanted under you, and so that's going to be leveled out as part of the process. So then we'd want to level that out coming up onto the city's property too. So there's digging to construct and then evolution of the space to make it safer.
To finish it off.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, I would put a motion to approve the North House request for temporary grading.
I would second.
All right, anything else? Okay, I just have I'm just curious, because construction has been crazy, like last year and before, like, are you guys doing okay? Like, are you finding people to do work and you
Yeah.
can find your materials? Are things
We're doing
changing?
well. Yep.
It's feeling
So-
better that way
Yeah, I
in
mean,
general?
There's still a lot of details to work out, and we're going to be coming back to keep you fully informed and the community informed. But we're pretty confident in the next month we'll have final numbers on the project and have, you know, our team in place to move forward.
Yeah, because that last year is like you couldn't really do anything construction-wise. You know, you couldn't find materials or whatever. Just wondered if things were getting better for stuff. Cool. Okay.
Other questions?
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Yeah,
Thanks,
very
Greg.
good.
Yep.
Thanks a
Have a
lot.
good
You too.
All right. Moving right along. Oh my God, in record-breaking time.
Do you have somewhere to go tonight? Is that?
No, actually, I don't.
Don't. Ben?
That was you last
So
meeting.
fast.
I got you out the door last week, and you weren't even, or last time.
That's true. That's true.
Just wait till council updates. So, it's Arrowhead Animal Rescue.
Excuse me, I guess I get to stand in for those nice people.
Okay.
I mean, my name is Mary Kronzer, and I'm the treasurer of AAR. And all of a sudden, the spokesperson.
Yeah.
You got a whole team behind you, I think.
I do. Yeah. Okay, so, what we'd like to do is to have the city consider getting us a pound for the animals, because right now we're, of course, don't have one and haven't had one, I don't think, since 2021. You should all have an agenda and the information that we've got, and I know there's a lot that's been designated up at the business park, and what we're looking toward is to get some help, not help, but to have you guys get initiated on getting the building started. We will help with funding and financing. That's our position on here. But right now, if we get any more animals in, we're running out of places to put them. I've got several cats. Dale has several cats. Andy has a cat. So there's a small board of which there are 6 of us. Pat Campanero is a, what are you, Pat, officially? Consultant, thank you very much. So it's just the 6 of us that are on the board that are trying to get something going so we can take care of these animals if we possibly can. Anybody have any questions?
Yes. And I'm sorry I wasn't involved in 2021, although I did try to go back and watch some of the meetings and just kind of get some perspective on how this project came to life. But you're contributing $55,000 toward the construction costs, is that accurate?
At this point, yes, but we will also be doing some fundraising and have more money to be able to put towards the project also.
Okay, and the city and the county are both previously allocated $25,000, is that still accurate?
Yep.
Good.
And do we have any, is there a plan or an estimate, or
We did have a plan, and we had a plan that was drawn up by Mark Peterson, and Chris Skildum was going to be the, I didn't get in on this with a contractor on that, but it was at that point a little bit more than I think what anybody could afford, so it kind of fizzled at that point. Yeah, it was close to.
How much?
257,000, is that right, Dale? Yes.
Okay.
That-
So that leaves us considerably short.
And there are, as they've mentioned before, they are going to go out and look for grant dollars. So,
I
and
mean, we'll
think
go out
there
and
are
look
some.
for funding, but we've tried to do this prior to the fact that we've run up against, and Pat or somebody here can correct me if I'm wrong on this, that we've gone to probably looking at grants, but the people at the grants say, well, where is your building, where's your lot? And at that point, we didn't have one, and they said, I'm sorry, there's no way we can give you any grants or any funding at this point in time.
You need to have a plan, that's what
need
we
to have
talked
a
about in
plan, right.
December.
So we've got a building plan.
Mm-hmm.
What we don't have is somebody to build it, and that's what we're looking toward the city and the county. Because we don't have the ability to do contracting. That's not what we're about. So,
I'll just give you a little bit more history too.
Yeah.
So when I was last on city council and we were busy, we'd known about the marina and the need to move all of those buildings back then. And we also were busy building the garage that ended up at the top of the hill. And at one point there was a verbal agreement that this would be done by the city at the top of the hill in that spot easily. And somewhere along the line that totally got lost, and I don't know because I left. But we did have not a very detailed plan with a building whatever, but we had a idea that this would be taken care of. So where something dropped in the meantime, I don't know.
So remind me, what was torn down and what is being proposed to replace that structure? Was it a
Cement
It was the,
block building.
was it a $250,000 building that we're?
No idea, it'd been there forever. I mean, it's just a simple building. I don't even think, I've seen this drawing, it's not a really fancy building.
you're talking about the one that.
Yeah,
well,
yeah, right
we-
now.
That we've got now, yeah, that Mark
I
Peterson.
mean, it's just a
grew up.
ballpark, and then we'd have to refresh those numbers, and we need to get, well, hopefully with your help, we need to get grant dollars in on this. Let's see. And, well, you were here when James came and explained the counties, no, maybe not, when the county explained why they are donating money. Like, I didn't understand why this is our city ordinance, right?
Because they get calls and they.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they have a need for this service as well. It's city's ordinance, though, that creates this need.
Yeah. It says in the minutes from April 28th that Chris is going to do the building for nothing, so I appreciate that, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Chris is hiding behind mine right now, I can kind of ask him, but.
yeah.
Well, Chris did donate time to his credit.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's been paid, but he did quite a bit of work helping us understand what it was going to cost.
Yeah.
So what's the process forward? How do we get what's being asked of us at this time, I guess, to?
Take back over the construction process, and they will help with the financing portion. And then we'll have to see where we land.
I mean, there was an agreement between the city and AAR, which was originally drawn up in 2011.
Yeah.
That's in
And
here.
basically, I guess, at this point in time, that's still in effect, and that would still remain the same unless we were to rewrite that, because right now, our board of directors has completely changed since that agreement was written up.
Sure.
So we'll be, like I said, we would be the ones that would be taking care of the animals and that type of thing, is what it was with the city prior to the time when the old pound was destroyed. So we're hoping to move forward with this so that we've got, it's not like we have 1,000 dogs or cats or whatever running loose in the city, but on the other hand, there's a need for this. And right now, the people that are the board directors or board of AAR we're at capacity with our own homes, trying to take care of the animals, the strays and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the dogs, if they don't go over to Dale's, they ended up going up to LEC and being put in a crate at LEC, and there just wasn't a lot of, people to go out, take care of them, walk them, that type of thing. So this is why we're hoping that this can be moved forward. They've got a lot up there at the park, business park.
Just curious, did you guys ever have a chance to meet with that recommended engineer at all, just to assess that lot at all, or no? Oh, you got something to add on that one, Chris?
So just, hi, I'm Chris Skildum. I was the contractor retained to look at the Pound project, 2021. We did work with Keith from Beaver River Consulting, and he started some stormwater engineering for the project. One of the parts of that project being more than everyone expected for cost was there was, as with all the lots up in the business park, there was a stormwater component that was significant even for a really small project. In addition to that, when the state looks at permitting that for plumbing, they see that project as commercial, so it initiates state plumbing permit process, and that applies to everything from the inside plumbing to the stuff that goes in the ground. So some of the costs that have already been incurred were the preliminary engineering for stormwater and civil, and the state plumbing code review for the project. And other besides that, it was the actual drafting and design and estimating that was billed out to AAR. So I didn't donate that. They did pay fair and square for that, so that all that information belongs to them.
Thank
That's
you.
helpful,
Hopefully that
thanks.
helps. Just,
Yeah,
It
Yeah.
does.
you know.
that's good to know.
Definitely. Thank you, Chris.
Well, it seems like the only thing we're missing here is money.
Well, the other thing we're missing is someone to lead a project, which they very clearly, and I agree 100%, don't need to lead this project, but someone does. And it's either the city or the city and the county together, or we hire someone to lead this, but it needs a project person to get it moved along. Whether that be a contractor or whatever. Because they take care of animals.
I'm here if you need me.
That's their expertise.
I agree with Mike that, I mean, we're missing money. We don't know how much money we're missing,
Right.
right?
Well, we know how much money we were missing a year ago. It's probably not less.
Yep. Yeah, it's probably more, but we won't know unless we start a project and keep finding out. And we don't know how much money they can raise either.
Well, who's going to own and maintain this building?
I believe the city does.
City,
Yeah.
they did before,
the-
they would again.
Yeah.
It's our
Unless-
ordinances that create this.
Yes.
And it's a service that cities serve and provide.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, Craig? Reactions?
No, it's always about
Yes.
money. We've been talking about this for a long time. I mean,
Yeah.
That's been bouncing.
no, I don't, I mean, I saw the plans and I didn't know about the plumbing being commercial and that's an uptick on cost, but, I don't know what kind of building. I guess I didn't. When you saw the initial plans, I mean, is there any way to rework those? Or, I mean, is that ultimately what you need? I'm just brainstorming in my mind.
I don't know. It was awfully plain and-
$257,000 dog pound, and I understand there's other costs like plumbing, land prep, cement for the foundation, but, I mean, I'm just thinking like a garage package from some economy of garages that's insulated. Instead of a garage door, you're putting windows in it, and, I mean, is that a cheaper way, a different way to look at this, maybe?
We talked
Yeah,
Not
about
to
that
take
in
away building
December.
from anybody, but I'm just
No.
kind of,
Hey, Chris.
I'm just throwing
Stay
a
up here.
concept out there, whether it's right or wrong, I mean, you
And
know,
we've checked into that too.
Yes.
Yeah.
because they come up, they put it up, it's done, you know, you can modify it the way you want it.
Yep.
Yeah, so.
I don't
During the design process, we went through a handful of iterations to try and affect cost, while still meeting all the needs that were in that, what that criteria of a dog pound is. I think that what we came up with is probably the most cost-effective thing we could come up with. Now, you could have a lesser product that doesn't meet the needs of a pound, economy garage, and, you know, however else you want to cobble that together, but you're not comparing the same thing, so.
No, I'm not trying to compare
Yeah.
the same thing. I'm just trying to get a price range. This is what you get for this, this is what you get for this,
Yeah.
this is what you get for this.
Sure.
And what do we want to decide on? Because ultimately, what we decide on means we have to generate some more money to reach our goals of building this.
Right, so another thing about the design, I don't even have it in front of me, but I know that a big focus was on the ownership and maintenance of the building. And so it was designed around having little to no maintenance.
Yeah.
And even considerations for if it's not occupied or fully staffed, can it support itself? So if it's a pound and it needs to maintain, you know, temperature and electricity and other things, could it be left alone if there's no need for it for a week or a month at a time? So, you know, those things were considered in the design, so. Just trying to, because it was so long ago, I'm just trying to
Yeah.
review what we actually did go through to get where we got.
Sure.
So,
Would a dog pound actually need that commercial plumbing?
For any of our
Hypothetically.
plumbers to do it, I mean, if you're suggesting that we,
Like if we rezoned it to something that wouldn't.
Well, what triggered
Required.
it was the business park that triggered the,
the business park and that we had Cavalin Plumbing look at it, and they initiated that. So I trust them to say if that's a decision they need to make, that they want to follow those rules. You know, it's like electrical, people wire their own houses in the woods, but really you're supposed to be pulling permits for those types of things. So, you know, could we get around additional state or beyond jurisdiction as a city? I don't know, that's not a question for me.
I wouldn't try it. I
I
mean, why
wouldn't
would
try
we
it.
do that?
right?
Not the city's gonna own and maintain it.
Yeah.
Right. That doesn't.
So
make
the
sense.
257 is just the building, or does that include excavation and all of that?
That's out the door for the excavation, lot prep, and the building. That quote has
was.
since expired by a long time, so that was a snapshot at the time it was quoted.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was gonna be talking about this tonight.
Me neither.
Thank you, Chris.
Well, I did have one
Thank you.
question for Mr. Roth. Mr. Mike Roth. So this agreement is still in force?
Oh, that's arguable. It's not really relevant. It doesn't.
Okay.
It's
I mean,
the
I'm just
model we
curious,
want to
just
use. If there is a pound, this is how we've decided to operate.
Okay.
But since there's not one, it's not how we're operating right now. So, is it still in force? That's a question.
I guess I was wondering more in terms of the timing. Like it was made in 20,
Yeah, it automatically renews for 5-year periods unless we want to cancel it. It's got cancellation provisions in it that
Okay.
we haven't actively done.
Okay.
So if we want it to be enforced, it is. If we don't, it doesn't have to be. But it doesn't matter because it's just not really relevant to our current situation.
Okay.
What are the possibilities that something like this could tie into LEC expanding, you know, with the county building?
Good point.
It's a possibility, but they don't know what they're gonna do, and it would only, like if they decided to go at that
They're
plan
currently
over
in the
there.
process of exploring that, right?
Right, but that could be 4 years from now. I mean, they don't have a very short time frame like we do. I mean, I agree with you, it'd be nice to tie it all together, but, and they don't know what they want to do. I mean, they have those two different possibilities, but yeah, in an ideal world, wouldn't that be nice
Mm-hmm, yeah.
to put it all together? They might like that too.
I have a question for the topic and just a thought. Is the, excuse me, is that lot within the business park if it's allocated for this pound, is it deeded to AAR or is it willing to be deeded to AAR? And the reason I ask is because if AAR is looking for additional help or grants, it looks a lot better to propose to folks that give out assistance and grants if a property is deeded in the name of the people that are asking for help. So I don't know the answer, but I just thought I'd bring that up.
How are we titling that lot now? Or has it
The
moved?
EDA still owns it.
Okay.
It was an open question whether the city or the county would own it, although it
Okay.
doesn't sound like it's very open here, so the city should own it. If we're gonna own the building, we should own the land.
That's my understanding too.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
If it's the county, it's gonna operate the building more than us, which is why we also talked about the possibility of the county owning it. I don't know that it matters. It's not gonna make a financial difference on people's decisions of contributing to it, at least from the city or the county's perspective. County's willing to contribute whether they own it or not, so are we.
Yeah.
Well, once again, we're sitting here at a spot, this has dragged out way too long. And once again, we're sitting in a spot where we have lots of questions and we can't make a really good answer, I don't feel, until we get some questions answered. So I think we need to find someone to help head up a project to at least move some of this along. And also that means that I think the organization needs to come up with their grant or fundraising proposal and tighten it up with timelines as well. And come back to us with your plans for fundraising so we know, you have a ballpark idea of what we might be able to expect or sources even. I don't mean dollar amounts, but I mean where you might be looking and just some time frames, like, oh, we wouldn't know this for 9 months or
No,
that
we're already
you know,
on it.
whatever,
Yep.
however you have to go look, but just so we have a plan from you about what you view as fundraising and what you intend to do. And then maybe we could move forward and get some help trying to figure out, you know, get some cost estimates, currents, just write up the plan of what steps would need to be taken, and then we can have a better assessment of what we can do or not do, or where we have to move things. Because we all have questions.
Yes.
Well, I'd just like to say I'm walking my brick around. So just so you know, we have a list of what potential grants we might want to apply for. And we have a lot of other ideas around just plain donations that animal lovers will give, and we've seen across the country. And one of them is certainly selling bricks with your pet's name on it in the place. So we can actually produce that list of what our fundraising ideas are relatively quickly.
Okay, cool.
But I just wanted to show you my brick.
Okay.
It's a lovely
You
brick.
didn't show me your brick, did you? Oh, your pet brick, okay.
Well, yeah, and maybe there's,
Yes.
like you said, people love their pets. So maybe there are some really good ideas that way to do some solid fundraising there that would surprise all of us. I don't know. That's not my deal. I'm not very good at that, so. Anyone else got some other ideas or thoughts for moving this forward? Aaron?
Not entirely certain.
Okay.
I'd-
Make
yeah.
sure you had ample opportunity to weigh in
Thanks.
on this. I have seen your plan, but maybe, do we have that somewhere, Mike? Or should we ask them to resend it?
We have it.
Okay. Oh, is it in here and I
I
just
didn't see it in the
zipped right
packet.
through it?
I don't think we put
Not
it
the
in
building
packet.
plans,
No.
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 The building plans initially that Mark Peterson set up for us, there were some issues in there that needed to be addressed as far as how the dog kennels and how the rooms needed to be divided up. So that, those plans have been revised.
Yes.
And we can give you the copy of the revised plans that
Okay.
Mark has done so that, for instance, they were supposed to be just chain link fence between the kennels, and you can't have that with the dogs, especially if you've got an animal that needs to be in quarantine. So these panels between the kennels have to be solid, preferably cement or something to that effect where they can be easily cleaned and the dogs can't get each other or anything like that. So that was one of the things, and that there has to be drains in each of the kennels. And this is just simple things, and I think once those plans are redone, I know we've got the updated plans from Mark someplace, and we can certainly give those to you.
That might help, because I don't know if anyone else, I mean, you showed me those in December when we met, but I don't know if anyone else has.
I haven't seen them. Oh,
seen
wow.
them. I have those guys just at the end of the year to kind of get status, and so. All right.
And like I said, Craig had a good idea about getting in, I have a barn on my property that's 36 by 72, and Lester did it for us. And it took him 3 days to put it up. Now, it doesn't have a floor in it. It's not insulated, but if we could get something like that, and I did call Lester Building down in Duluth, and the first thing they sent me was, before we talk to you, you have to fill out this loan application. And so I didn't follow up on that. But that's who was the one that built our barn, and I'm sure that they would be, there might be other buildings and stuff, but I have checked into that type of structure with not real good success at this point, but on the other hand, I probably don't know what I'm asking for, so I would like somebody that's a little bit more versed on what I need or what we need to go in on that. And is that something that would be successful for, rather than a nice stick and brick building or whatever? That's
Well,
just-
and Chris makes a good point, it could be quiet, it isn't like there'll always be people in there, and you want to make sure it can take care of itself. We don't need any unfortunate surprises either.
Right.
In a
Since we'll
building
have to
like that.
maintain it
Yeah.
year over year.
Well,
Pay
we'll
now or
be
pay
in there.
later.
You maintain it as far as the utilities and that type of thing, but we will be there to work with the animals and do the day-to-day
Yeah,
stuff.
I really
That's-
meant the building.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Property.
Yeah. What is that? My new fun expression, value engineering is not a value.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, we'll work on this a little bit more. You guys can, when you have a chance, get your thing. That'll help us get smarter about your ideas for fundraising.
Okay.
And I guess when you guys met before, whatever requirements is there, you were talking about some right now, but are there this list of requirements that a dog pound has to have in its building spec'd out but you already had that all, Chris, when you guys, so it's somewhere in all of the documentation we'll get? Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll understand, because we could look at it and kind of go, well, why do we have this? Well, we would know, it's a requirement, just like you said, commercial plumbing, well.
Right.
Yeah, and it was pared down to just the needs.
Yeah.
It's pretty bare bones.
Sure.
Just when people are exploring other options for structures, the cost of a project like this is more than the sum of its parts. So you can have Lester, Morton put up a building or economy garage. To get all the other components tied in correctly to make it work is you're probably still going to be at a comparable cost. That's my intuitive take on those other things.
Sure.
And AAR, we don't know the wherewithal of how to contact contractors or work with them. We figured that's why we need the city to help us on this.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, we'll look for this stuff from your end, and we'll get something headed on our end, and we can probably go back and chat with the county about it too a little bit.
Okay. Appreciate everybody listening to us. I know it's not, like a children's wing in the hospital, but in other words, it is something that we do need.
We do. Yep.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Hey, you're up.
That leads us to Chris being, did you want to change chairs?
Mike wants his microphone.
We might both have to talk on this one.
Did you want to introduce this one, Ben?
Oh, I don't, this is Chris Gildum from Vesta Unchained. He's a private developer who's using his land, building 24 lots. He's got preliminary plat approval. I think the context for today's discussion was essentially to look at the developer agreement, which is all but complete, maybe?
It can be,
Okay.
yeah.
So, and I know that you guys have all read it and studied it, so I'm sure there's lots of questions about it. But initially, I just wanted to, I called Chris and asked him to give me an update, and as he was talking about his project, it was, he was speaking like Greek. Like I didn't know anything about this process. And I thought, well, like, if I'm feeling that way, and I was in carpentry, and I'm just got a feeling like we're gonna be faced with these questions more and more, and if we're gonna be asked to make decisions on some of this stuff, we should probably be involved in some of the conversations that lead up to when those decisions are made, right? And so I wanted and so I've looked at these developer agreements as they've sort of been revised a little bit. And so Chris is here. He's here to take questions. He's here to give perspective. He's here. Mike is can tell us about what's gone into it. Chris is here. I'm sure Chris had a lot to put into this as well. And I've got a bunch of questions on it, but I guess I don't know where you want to start. So.
Do you want to ask your questions first or someone else? Or you want to go around the room?
Should we
or-
give a quick, just background, just a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do that. Let's do
All
that.
right, so he's doing a plat. That's simple. He's just dividing up lots to sell for housing. The plat is divided up using the zoning rules that are accessed because it's connected to municipal sewer, which it currently is not. That creates an ability to do a lot more density. So you have to have a 200-foot by 350-foot lots to do septics, and you can have 40-foot lots that are, or 50-foot lots that are 5,000 square feet, quite a bit smaller if you've got connected municipal sewer. So that was always Chris's plan, to have municipal utilities. Well, that just ramps it up multiple orders of magnitude in terms of cost and complexity. So the way that we handle that complexity is if the city is going to be involved in either the financing or owning or operating of the utilities that are being constructed, then we have this developers agreement that talks about the different requirements on everybody. And as you can see, it's a beast. It's got a lot of requirements. Our primary concern is to make sure that the product that's created is one that we're willing to own and operate forever. That's what we're getting out of it. And our secondary concern is to make sure that the developer has a project that they can actually do. That has to be done too. Like, they both have to work, otherwise there isn't a project. And it's awfully expensive. So some of the ways that we make sure that we're willing to own and operate the things that they build forever, built into this agreement, are multiple requirements for engineering checks that the design is adequate. So he can pay our engineers to do it or pay his own engineers to do it, which is what he selected, and then we had our engineers just look over their shoulder a little bit. Then he can hire his own contractors to do the construction. Our original draft of this required those contractors to be experienced in this type of work, meaning they've got 3 examples of this that they've done before. That's a real problem up here to try and use local crews, because there aren't any companies up here that can necessarily meet that requirement. And we want there to be the ability to use local crews. And yet that's the most important step to make sure that the product that's built is of quality, is to make sure that people that are doing it know what they're doing and have proven that. And then there's maybe the biggest hurdle, there's financial securities that we also require, that the developer provide us with some sort of financial securities that we can access. If for some reason they don't finish the project, we can finish it on their behalf, because it'd be worse for everyone if there's a half-finished project. So, good plans, the right contractors, and a boatload of financial securities, and that's basically what we've got built into this. And we've been talking about it for I don't know how many months now. 5 months,
Yeah,
6
since-
months?
Since July.
Okay, 8 months.
Yeah.
So that's how long it's taken to go back and forth and try and figure out how do we do this? How do we make this deal work so that there's a project he can build and it's one that we're willing to own and operate? And I think we're there now. So there's the recent hurdle that we've been talking about in this group is the idea that we might need to amplify the water pressure with a booster station. And the original idea of that was that it might cost $250,000, and the first real engineering look at it was twice that, and now the more recent detailed update engineering look is more like $900,000. So, I mean, that's almost as much as the whole project was going to cost him. So that just is a terrible option for everybody to consider, and we're looking for other ideas instead. So the way that this current deal is drawn up, the booster station is not in it. There's language in the contract that allows us to say it's a requirement. But we don't even want to own and operate the thing for 24 lots. $1 million piece of equipment that only serves 24 houses is just a bad investment. So we don't want it. It's there to make sure that there's adequate water pressure for residential use and for fire protection if we want to use that system for fire protection. Without the booster station, we won't use it for fire protection. We'll just provide fire protection the way we do the rest of the city that's not served by hydrants with tankers and pumps. And for the cost of that station, we've got, I think, some incentive and ability to look at other alternatives, which, you know, Chris is on top of the alternatives for the residential use.
Like end user stuff or
Private water system, serving
Water
the
tower.
development. Tower is a strong word, but either a combination of a private water system and private storage, or pressure boosters that serve the end user. So the Don McKeever has kindly put a lot of input into thinking outside the box how we can make this work, and the best way that we've come up with is to put the burden of pressure on the individual property owners with constant pressure booster system that's similar to what is installed with low producing wells, large homes, low producing wells, but you need adequate pressure. That proposal was sent to MSA. They haven't done the full long form engineering and calculations, but the short form shows that the pressure that is at the source, at the substation, is adequate to work with those systems for the end users of the development. So
not necessarily for fire suppression.
no, not for fire suppression. No.
Okay.
Well, this plan is still working on that question, I think. There's hydrants that are in the existing engineering, and the engineers are saying they don't meet the standards that a typical hydrant would need to meet in order to be used for fire protection. But they're still included in the engineering, and we'll probably still build them because we need to have some way to flush those lines, and that's typically how that's done.
So is there anything in our city language codes or otherwise that talks about adequate PSI at end user levels?
No.
Or- No.
So
What did we do years ago when we extended water up to the U.S. Forest Service up the hill? I mean, it was always at the Harbor Light and Headstrom's in there, but when we took it to the U.S. Forest Service, we extended our water sewer, didn't we, at that time?
yeah,
Did we have to boost pressure?
Mhm.
They have good pressure? I mean, we
I
have
don't
hydrants
know.
up there that are good, I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, I'm just wondering, when this came up to me, Chris said, well, I gotta put, this is something that they're talking about, and I'm kinda going, well, right away, I thought, well, just below your property, which is at a lower elevation slightly, is Highway 61 with fire hydrants running along it.
Yeah.
So my first question was, what's the pressure at those versus what may be the pressure at because your water line's coming off of what street is
The
what?
top of Lupin Lane is where the connection is planned for, so that's where the existing power plant and substation are located.
Above that, yeah. And the nearest water
Are
line.
we looking like up from the harbor, like, you mean over by
Up from the Super 8.
Yeah, that's
Above
what,
the
yeah, back
Super
to
8,
there,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So it's there and then going up, okay, all right.
So I don't know, I just think that, I don't know, I'm wondering why his water pressure would be so much less than everybody else's.
But it sounds like we're talking about two very different things now, right? 'Cause
Well-
this development agreement doesn't
No.
really take into account.
No, no, it's not, yeah,
Fire
right,
suppression.
we are, but I'm just saying that was,
Yeah.
when he started, that was taken out of this now. The,
Sort of. you said.
sort of, but,
Well, we left ourselves an option. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think we've asked you that question. So I'm not going to bring you a contract that makes that decision without having you have a chance to talk about that.
Okay.
That's a big policy question. And we don't have any earlier discussions that we've had as a community about that. This is a first type of this development. There was a conversation that started for the property at the top of the business park. One Roof Housing was looking at developing that into a residential, single-family subdivision. And there was going to need to be a booster station there to provide for that development, but it didn't ever happen. It really didn't progress very far at all because numbers didn't work.
Well, I think I'd be a little hard pressed to incorporate a new, I mean, it sounds like the only way we're gonna do that is through some sort of an ordinance or city code, right? And how are we gonna do that when we've already got a development agreement, approved? I mean, how are we gonna, like, why would we do that to Vesta Unchained down the road? Or am I missing something on that?
Well, I'll give you some hypotheticals to answer that open-ended question. Because just again, a little background, we don't have any other booster stations in town. We've never had an engineering company suggest we need one.
Okay.
We've never built a subdivision of 24 single-family units.
So we don't have a booster station boosting our water pressure anywhere.
We do, that basically the water treatment plant's a booster station. It's got large, high-service pumps that push
Yeah.
water up the hill.
Right.
And then we've got another one at the towers above the hospital, same thing. They just boost the water up to the tower on top of the hill.
Then everything else is gravity.
Everything else is gravity. So, I mean, we know what we're talking about when it comes to pumps and operating them, but it's not, I mean, those aren't really designed to just pressurize the lines. They do function that way, but that's not really what they're designed for. So we don't have this in our system. We don't have any regulations in our zoning ordinance that talk about what's required for water. We're much more concerned about wastewater. So our zoning and subdivision ordinances have language about wastewater, but not water. The developers agreement is a place where we can have those conversations about these one-offs like this, where we don't have regulation because there's nothing else to regulate that's comparable to this. If we've got this happening 5 or 6 times, we need an ordinance. If we don't, we just need to make a policy decision, and then this developers agreement can be the home of that policy decision. So we don't know enough about why we would want this thing to make a decision about building a $500,000 or $800,000 system. No one's convinced any of us that that's the right way to go. But that doesn't mean that we won't learn something about the fire protection question, or that we won't learn something about his plans for providing pressure systems, or that we won't come up with an alternative, which is also what the language in the developers agreement allows for. So just because it's still new, there's language in here to deal with that. At where I stand on it right now, I don't see a need to build it. I don't want to. I don't want him to.
Just as a technicality, whose engineering company threw that out there? Yours?
Guilty, which is, it's brutal because I can't even blame Mike for that one.
I'm sure you
So
still
it wasn't
can.
LHB, it was, okay.
did they have a reason other than
Yeah.
24 houses, we need more pressure? I mean, did they analyze or study what's currently going on Highway 61 going north that's below you? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm just
no,
kinda-
not the rest of the city.
Okay.
From what I understand, they didn't really study what's happening in the rest of the city. they're studying a template for designing a neighborhood based on their experience in other municipalities. So
Okay.
if they have this template and they draw it with fire suppression, and then they do the back-end engineering to see if there's adequate pressure for the fire suppression, they're gonna bring it up, because that's the way they first drew it. And to speak to fire hydrants, there's two different types of hydrants. There's flushing hydrants and fire hydrants. If we didn't have adequate pressure for fire suppression, we wouldn't have fire hydrants there. They would be flushing hydrants. They'd be similar for that purpose. The way I read and understood, Mike had a slightly different interpretation, but the statutes and rules and guidelines around fire suppression are, if you're going to have fire suppression, then it needs to be built to a certain specific standard,
Yeah.
requiring a pressure booster. But within the city rules and the rules at large, there's nothing that says that a development within a city has to have fire suppression. So they're kind of two separate things. It's
Probably because they're $1 million,
right.
right?
Yeah.
You could buy a tanker truck for the fire department.
Can get two.
Yeah.
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 Like, I'm sure that's,
So
And park them there?
it's gotta be super specialty stuff, right? Like, just like there's one company that makes them.
I mean, my thoughts on this and request is that, you know, Greater Cook County and a lot of Grand Marais doesn't have fire suppression. And there's a lot of creative ways within the entire county to get water to the end user. From what I understand, the sewer is the priority to be able, according to the ordinance, divide as small as I've divided this property. And there are many other options to get water to that end user. So I don't want this whole idea of a pressure booster to hold up the forward motion of this project. And I'm with Mike. I don't want to build it, and I don't want the city to have to own it. I think it's, unless there was some miracle grant coming out of the sky, which doesn't happen, and even then, we still don't want to own it.
No, even if you gave it to us for free, then we'd have to replace it someday.
And there's operating costs,
Yeah.
you know, there's electrical operating costs, there's propane backup generator operating costs. It's a big project, and it's disproportionate to the development I'm trying to build.
Mhm.
So,
I'm glad that you guys took it out.
Well, this isn't really a question, but I don't understand how an engineer can do this and not be looking at the world it's analyzing. So he comes up, or they come up and say you potentially need this booster, but they don't do that analysis in the terms of where they're literally going to be, right? Just what you were asking, Craig. I don't.
No, they
understand
had
if they can do
data
that.
about the water supply that was available that they're gonna connect to. We do have
Okay.
data
I guess I
about,
misunderstood you, Chris. I thought you meant they just started generally.
yeah,
but-
the data that they're working with is the proposed tie-in place at the Grand Marais substation. So they have data about the existing pipes there and the pressure at the connection point.
Okay, I misunderstood you. The other question I had, and I think I already know the answer from what you just said as far as what's around the county, but this other direction for fire protection does not too adversely then affect a homeowner. You know, they always ask you right away, like, how close are you to a fire station? How close are you to,
For your like protection class?
well, yeah, why am I
Yeah.
looking at you?
If
And
you're
you know
in
what
the
I
city,
mean?
They
Yeah.
probably
Just 6
assume
anyway.
you have.
That's usually miles of fire department or
Right.
1,000 foot to a fire hydrant, usually.
yeah,
Okay.
which it won't be. So
Which it won't be, right? But so it'd be a 6X instead of a 7. It'd be a mild rating change, but not.
Okay, it's not a huge thing that way either for some, you know, you hate to somewhat that way. Okay.
Yeah,
But good
this is
question.
just another, I think, question for maybe the planning commission to chew on too, is we don't have any regulations about water supply. And do we need them, or are we comfortable without them? Is a good policy question for them to look at. You know, our subdivision ordinance is designed for a growing suburb in terms of the way it was written, but it also is completely lacking in any sort of detail about what our engineering standards are. They're always to be made up as a project occurs, and so it might be time to beef that up a little bit if we want to keep doing this.
Yeah.
That's why I find this all difficult. It's certainly not my expertise. You are learning a lot and trying to do a super huge project. The city has no expertise or background. We have not done this before. How much is Jason Hale entering into this? I mean, I'm trying to think of one person who has some expertise in these kinds of agreements and developments.
Yeah, well, he's my direct competitor, so he doesn't want anything to do with this one.
No, he's not your direct competitor by any stretch of the imagination. He is not your direct competitor.
We brought him in for some of our conversations just to see if there was a role for him. And I think if we've got questions, he's willing to take them. But this isn't his project, so there's not an active role for him necessarily.
But he is hired by the county to help us get housing. And it's not like he's a private developer. And he does have expertise.
Has
So
he
I
weighed
think
in at all on the developer agreement at all, like itself? I mean, I'm sure he's seen these things
Yes,
probably
so
more than we have.
I can speak to that a little. He has said that as far as requiring securities and things like the engineering observation fee, this is pretty standard stuff. And those were the big ticket items that were sorted through in the first 6, 7, 8 rounds of drafting this thing to where we could agree on it. I can say that it started, the first one I got was much more burdensome than this one. It seemed impossible. So, through a lot of work and a lot of work on the part of Mike and my legal team and our engineers, we got it to a place that could work specifically for this project. It started with a big pile of boilerplate that was not specific to what we're actually trying to do here, so.
That's good to know.
But you like this product.
I mean, I don't love it, but I can work with it.
I don't love it either, but I do know that it works. It's not, this wasn't written specifically for us. This is something that Chris's team's developed and has been used, Chris Hood's team has developed and has been used in many places in the state of Minnesota. So it's new to us, but it's not new. It's not really new to us either, frankly. This is about our third time going through it. This is just the first one we've managed to get to the end on, maybe.
So one of the things that I want, well, I'm passionate about this project for Chris because I like when private contractors and developers come to the table and they put their money out there where their mouth is and they try to solve a problem and make some money doing it, and that's a really great thing. I just want to make sure that we're not standing in the way of that, like by providing additional redundancy or redundancies and excess and money that I read this thing and it seems like we're super airtight, like we're really protected well, you know, and that's probably by design. But like in some of these projects, like if you want more developers coming to do work here, and you want this types of development, you have to create, there's always a little bit of risk. And it's like, well, how much is tolerable and how much is not? And are we not okay with any risk at the expense of all this extra oversight? You know, like what is that extra, that observation fee? Is that running you $100,000? Is it, like, is that necessary? I mean, do we, I don't know, like, but this is your contract, it's your agreement.
Yeah, let's talk specifically about that. So the original draft of this talked about construction engineering in the way that we would typically talk to an engineer about it, which is as a percentage of the total project cost. That's typically how engineers want to charge for construction administration, which involves all the contracting work with the contractors, doing inspections on site to make sure that what's built is done, creating record drawings so that we've got maps of everything that was built, testing things that need to be tested, just the oversight of the whole project. And it was, I think, 7% was what we had in there. And what we have now is not a percentage at all, but a quote from his engineer of what they want to charge to actually do the construction administration. So that's what it costs, and I look at that number and I think it's not out of line of what I would expect to, it might even be less than I might expect to pay somebody to do this, so. But if somebody's got a better quote that is doing the work that we need done,
Right.
we'd look at that.
What other concerns or big issues in general do you have to get this project moved forward for yourself? And what, I mean,
Sure.
maybe you have such a long laundry list, but
Yeah, it's a pretty long list. Yep. This is when the work begins. If we get, city council's approval on this resolution to agree in the future, pretty much is how I understand it, which is totally cool. Then the work begins in that, up to this point, I've had lots of interest from primary lenders, commercial lenders, gap funding, a lot of conversations about how to fund this thing, how to approach the securities, whether if it was lines of credit, private investors providing securities for the project, or purchasing a security from a surety company, buying a bond. And none of that could be underwritten without the development agreement, without those numbers filled into the development agreement to create the basis for all those other costs, right? And so one of the tough parts about timeline for this is shortly after preliminary plat approval, I had a commercial appraisal completed for the project that was also a really key component in all of the financing, is creating a retail value for that plat. And it was given a 6-month expiration. Now, fortunately, even though we're after the 6 months, the primary lender has said that they would provide a grace period. So I should have up to 12 months from that. And it wouldn't be, we have enough momentum and into this, it wouldn't be the end of the world to have it reappraised. In fact, it would likely appraise at least slightly higher than the initial appraisal at this point in time. That's kind of how the market is working right now. But time is of the essence, right? So time kills deals. If this were to take much longer, all that momentum and that appraisal and the people willing to finance this thing would lose their attention spans. I might even lose mine at some point.
Yeah.
so financing is your next step.
Yeah.
And short of that timeline, what were your other, like, just big picture timelines? If you got finance, if you got that going, what would be some of your timelines after that?
We could break ground this summer, this 2023 season. Summer's a
Okay.
really weird word around here.
2023 building season, and the estimated timeline for construction observation is 5 weeks for road and 5 weeks for water and sewer. It wouldn't necessarily be divided like that, the scopes would intermingle, but 10 working weeks. And we'd do everything we could to knock it out within that 10 working weeks or close to it. My company has a limited capacity, but we also have the help of the whole community. There's a lot of good talent here. There's a lot of trucks, gravel, retail providers, and other folks that would provide assistance. I've already choreographed all that sort of stuff. It's ready to go.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So that part you feel pretty good about.
yeah.
So this and financing are your big things
Yep.
then, to get it rolling. Okay.
Walk me through, if you guys don't mind, this securities requirement and how that plays out. I mean, Chris, you just got $1.4 million sitting in a bank somewhere and you're going to give it to Mike.
No,
How does that,
actually, the
play
total is
out?
1.6
Well, I must be
something,
working
right?
off a dated.
Well, 1.432 is the securities. There's other things that are also required,
Yeah.
but that's the big one.
Okay.
That one is, yeah, that's one method that we would accept if he wants to just take that cash and put it in a bank in our name somewhere, but I doubt that's the one he's gonna pick. But it's up to him. The alternative is some kind of other security, like a bond or a surety bond sort of thing that we can draw on.
Would a bond not be more typical? Or how? Oh,
There are the two mechanisms are actually in the development agreement. There's an escrow agreement and there's a letter of credit, and those are the typical methodologies.
okay.
Bonds are not typically used
Okay.
largely because they're not payable to you as a beneficiary of the bond. So that's oftentimes a problem with bond financing.
Okay, good to know.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
It's important language. But the letter of credit, the way that would work is you're buying that letter of credit from a bank or somebody. You're paying them to have access to this credit for the period of the project.
Aaron, any questions or thoughts?
I guess I have a bit of a worry. The word that kind of got used from Mike, I think, was kind of like a suburb, and I worry about kind of like the suburbanization of the city. And I've looked at, I don't remember what it is, but there's this program that can figure out financial, how profitable certain places are. And I wonder if this is actually financially viable in the long term. Because we're going to take over the street, we're going to take over the water, everything. And especially if we get the water pump, that would be, well, that would just be bad for the city.
Yeah, then we don't have any question about its viability.
And so some of the things I've seen on those projections before is that suburbs are just, they don't make any money.
Yeah, I meant that in the sense that the types of things that it talks about are the things that a growing suburb might have, like park dedication fees and all the, we don't have new subdivisions 3 times a year here, right? This is the first real one since I don't know when, so.
Ever?
Ever.
Since ever.
Ever.
Maybe ever, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
You've never done something like this.
Yeah.
Not
So
for
it's
lack of interest.
it's the mechanism that doesn't fit very well, but it's using our zoning rules that are designed by this community for what this community wants. So
Right.
I don't worry too much about us looking like somewhere else because we get to decide what the rules are still.
I think I'd also maybe would add, although I have some confliction about it, but sort of in the business of providing service, right, rather than making it profitable.
Right.
But it's hard to put a number on what 24 families and what that impact would be to the community, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we could talk about what services we sell, right, to like power and water and sewer, right? Like there's some cost there, and then there's maintenance offset to roads and infrastructure, but like I think that's a difficult equation to come up with.
Right.
If you wanted to dig into it more, there's an organization called Strong Towns that
Oh, yeah.
spends a lot of time thinking about that
Yep.
very question. And their issue with suburbs, of course, is that they call it a Ponzi scheme even, that all of the upfront monies that cities put into getting these things built, and then they don't have any plan for their inevitable replacement, which means you just go look and see how cities have aged that have developed since the 40s.
Yeah, and a lot of what I was talking about came from them. So.
Great.
Well, there's suburbs and then there's cities. This is still the city of Grand Marais, and we're finally going to add a new neighborhood I like that vocabulary a lot better. This is not a suburb
And
by any
it's gonna be
stretch
the
of the
nicest
imagination.
road, even though it's a dead end in town.
I'm gonna go drive it.
I'm gonna go drive it, right?
Well,
Um,
and I do also worry about, so the street doesn't have any, it's gonna be a dead end, and even if we were to expand our grid that way, I don't think there's a way that we could hook our grid up to that in the future.
I think there is. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things we looked at
There's more private
early
land.
on in this project is where should the utilities come from? And the end of Second Street, there used to be overhead power lines that went through there and then came down across the highway by the harbor light. And they're not there anymore, but there's still easement for them.
Okay.
So I wondered, well, wouldn't that be where the utilities ought to come from? Is just head straight west at the end of Second Street? There's so much wetland and
Yeah.
there's so much distance there to cover still that it's just not worth making that investment now. But there's two other properties that are just like the one Chris is developing that are right above that piece
Right.
there. And if they want to develop sometime in the future, I think we would look at that. Is there a way to connect it through? And whether or not this neighborhood wants or needs to connect in the future, maybe it doesn't even need to, but there's certainly ways we could look at doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you looked at that.
Besides driving the streets, Michael?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a motion to approve this development. Resolution 2023-07, approving the development agreement between the City of Grand Marais and Vesta Unchained. That is the motion.
Thank you. Would anyone like to second that?
I'll second the motion.
Further discussion or comments?
There is a need for a final plat, really, before this is finished.
Oh, all right.
And the resolution is fine to go forward with, but we won't be signing the developer's agreement until the final plat is completed. Our final plat process is far simpler than the preliminary plat process when most of the hard work is done. They just come with a map, application, and it just comes to the council and you can take action on
He's
it.
trying to downplay how valuable your job is. So similar.
Well,
It's
which-
very
you
subtle.
want to go back into the
Very subtle.
preliminary plat again, or and have a public hearing and go to the planning commission or the final plat, which is
But
it just comes to the
I
council.
guess I'd like to ask Charlie a question right here, because it'll be helpful. Realistically, what do you think your, timeline for the scope of work?
Can Charlie introduce himself for our
Yeah.
viewing audience?
Totally.
Charlie Troball with North Shore Land Survey, and we've been working with Chris on this project. We're kind of sitting at the point where we need a go-ahead from Chris to start on the final plat, which Chris needs some of his sureties to give us that go-ahead. So that's kind of where we're at timeline-wise, not terribly long, it should fit into Chris's needs. As far as committing to an exact one,
Next Thursday, sound good?
maybe not quite that fast, but,
Friday?
Yeah, the biggest thing is just need to know that we gotta get rolling on it, so
How'd you say, you'll wear mud boots but not snowshoes?
that would make
Yeah.
more sense, yeah. Because part of the final plat is taking the preliminary plat, bringing it up to the point of a final plat, but then also that's when then it initiates the staking of all the lots and stuff, which is where I keep telling Chris, you don't want me to do that on snowshoes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what we're hoping to get tonight is a pin in this thing.
Okay.
Even if it's not signed, it's done being negotiated, and everybody knows what the terms are, and you can work with it.
You can work with it, Chris?
I can work with it. Yep.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Quiet.
Good job, guys.
That we're all set.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for this effort. This has been huge.
Absolutely.
I know it's a lot of your time.
Tomorrow morning?
Like hugely.
It is. Have a good night, folks.
Thanks, Chris. Now we get to the really complicated stuff. Leash laws, the really tricky stuff. hope I didn't skip anything when I scrolled down.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So Chris and Mike took our verbal conversation from a meeting or two ago and put some structure around it. And any thoughts about how this looks or things we'd like to change or, you know, piecemealing it here?
I just looked at, you guys approached law enforcement and also the county attorney. Did they give any advice on how to clean up some language or to add some context that would be helpful? They said it was vague. Was that intentional?
I'm assuming so. I mean, I talked to Pat when I was in talking with them initially, and that was limited because we added more things since then. But my question to him is, you know, we want to make this enforceable in a, you know, not a super complicated way.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's what we had with the county attorney, right?
So, here's what the sheriff said. I can see someone challenging the off-leash section when they're having their animal run beside them, saying it falls under training purposes. The ordinance suggests fetch as an allowable off-leash activity, but the language is subjective and could be interpreted differently in each circumstance. And I think he's right about that. It's still pretty open-ended. And he says, we will definitely work within whatever language is adopted by the council. And the county attorney said they just wanted to clarify what we meant by some of it, so that what we meant was private property is, they can be off-leash on private property, provided that the dog owner is on the domestic animal, is on the owner's property or the property of another with permission. And public property to swim or train as long as the animal is within 100 feet and under the verbal control of the owner. And then they suggested maybe or authorized agent, is there official dog walkers. So that was their one suggestion.
Okay.
I think that it's really difficult to imagine tightening up the language so that it's not subjective, unless we want to say there are no exceptions.
Well, or
And
like,
so this is really an exercise in looking at exceptions and trying to find our comfort level.
so like the permissions off are, for me, a combination of several different communities. Like one of them just mentioned the swimming thing, and that's all they said. And fetch, I think. And then someone else had training in there. So, I mean, we could even narrow that down to say playing catch or fetch, whatever, and swimming or one of the above or something like that.
And
I
I
wanted to.
specifically said swim in Lake Superior because I don't think there's anywhere else in the town where,
You'd want to put your dog swimming?
well, I mean, my dog would love to swim in every puddle that she can find, but I don't think we want to allow off-leash activity for swimming in the puddle in the alley behind City Hall, for instance. Like, it's just, that seems like there's really only one destination.
Yeah.
And then the question is, do we like that? Lots of people do it. Do we want to allow that dog swimming in Lake Superior on the beach as long as it's not a problem? Yeah, the engage in training such as fetch is probably cut and pasted exactly out of one of the other ordinances that we looked at. And I think that is, I mean, for sure, if I'm riding my bike with my dogs with me, giving them commands, that's what I'll tell you I'm doing, is training. And I think that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, training to me is more vague. I mean, what you could interpret it as. Playing fetch with your dog is different. Like, you're playing catch or you're not. Frisbee, ball, whatever. So,
We don't have training defined, so that is the, you know, the primary hole in the ordinance is that, not defining training.
yeah. So either
Is that
define
even
it or
something
remove
you
it?
want? Do you want that defined? Do you want it to be, is the goal to make it restrictive?
I don't know. I agree with you. It'd be hard to define that, right? Because you train your dog for all sorts of purposes. You know, hunting dog or just general obedience. You could say you're training for whatever. Ring the bell to let me out. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Does anybody have a bell?
Let me out of here. Ding, ding.
Don't laugh. Dee's dog does it. Knows to ring the bell and she lets him out.
I think Chris makes a good point. If we want to allow it, we ought to at least define it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure whether you wanted to allow it. I just wanted to have you get a look at what it might look like, and so we could talk about it.
So,
Definitely like the addition of adding the dog park exception and the private property exception as well, with owner's consent.
that seemed to be pretty standard and it hadn't
Yeah.
dawned on me.
Yeah.
But I read that in a lot of them that I read through. And I don't remember, I don't know if I have those, they're just all links. I don't remember if I had examples of training defined. Did you guys find any, Mike? Or did you guys? Chris,
I didn't
did
look
you
for
guys
that.
look for that? Okay.
No.
I don't remember if anyone had that.
I'm sure we can find a on-point example of it that we could modify for this, if you're interested in having that in the
Yeah,
ordinance.
so that's really the question, is do we want that as a thing and then?
Oh, I know, it's in my document. Yeah, I don't remember reading that. Anyone want to make a corporate decision on that to kind of lead that direction a little bit? Craig, what's your reaction to?
What's if you were to tighten up the training, are you saying training anywhere within the city or training on your own property?
Well,
If you're on your own property, you're clear no matter what.
no, I'm thinking this allows anywhere within the city. So for
Yeah.
instance, it's pretty common for me to see folks in the yard out in front of the courthouse doing fetch training with their dog.
Well, they could be training walking down the sidewalk out here too,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that
off leash.
there's opportunities for folks to do training off leash with the language that, if they're on private property, allows with permission. So we wouldn't necessarily have to go as far as allowing them to do training off leash anywhere. But I think most places people go to do training are public.
Yeah.
To the rec park, to the ball fields.
Well, the rec park, when it's in season, has a leash. Is that gonna be, this is gonna override anything that's going on down there? I mean, they have a leash law for the rec park, correct?
Well, they've got rules for their patrons,
Specifically for the rec park.
for rec park patrons.
Patrons, yes.
Yeah.
If they have a pet, yeah.
This ordinance would also, it wouldn't supersede anything that's more strict in terms of rules for patrons, but this is the rule that anyone would have to follow in the rec park. So if you're down there and you're not a patron, you're a member of the public.
You don't, their rules don't necessarily apply.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a gray area, but frankly, there's really no ability to go off-leash dogs in the rec park in July. You can't do it. It's just too many people down there, and dogs.
Yeah.
I'm reading Plymouth right now. They just say for training, but
Yeah.
there's no real definition on there.
Somebody will have one, but there's not going to be one that doesn't allow for subjectivity.
Yeah. Let's see what Anchorage was one of them as well.
I don't have a problem with it the way it reads now. But
And ultimately, too, it's, no matter what happens, it is the dog owner's responsibility. This does not make something fall back into the city's lap. No matter what's going on, even if your dog's on a leash and doing what it's, by law, they are still ultimately responsible for their pet.
Yep.
The reality of enforcement of something like this too is obviously the county attorney would have to make a determination that a criminal sanction can be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. And, if the language pertains to a training type of enforcement issue, this might be just something that they dismiss charges on too. I mean, that would be the reality, I think, of how this would work in effect. So, I think if you accept that language, you're accepting the ambiguity of that language, and it's probably why a lot of cities don't have that language. And probably why, like in St. Paul where I live, you know, I take my dog up to the park and I play fetch with the dog, but technically what I'm doing is illegal. And I could get ticketed for it, which is, you know, I'm not saying that that's the great system either, but that, so if you do accept this, I mean, I think that is the enforcement reality of it.
Sure. Well, and that's all the neighborhoods I lived in the cities, same thing, go to the park, let the dog play.
Well, it really shifts the conversation from, is your dog leashed or not, right back to 90.006, which is prevention of nuisance. And it clearly says what we say a nuisance is, and that it's your duty to prevent that from happening, and that it's a violation of this chapter if you don't prevent that from happening. So if you're training, that's fine, but if your animal frequently barks, howls, cries, chases vehicles, frequents school grounds, parks, or public beaches to molest or annoy anyone, or defile or destroy any property, then that's a nuisance. So that we've got covered pretty well, and that duty doesn't disappear regardless of what we say here.
Sure.
So in Anchorage, they said examples of allowed activities would be agility trials, retriever training, throwing and catching a frisbee. The code does not allow for off-leash dog walking, biking, unless the pet is in a designated off-leash dog park space, or skiing. Okay, so they just give examples, which to me isn't quite the same as a clear-cut definite, defining it, but anyways.
So you're saying we could leave the training in and know that we do have a backup enforcement mechanism. If they're really being annoying, there is something to be done, or no?
There is, yeah.
There is.
But it wouldn't be just about the connection of them to their owner with some sort of tether.
Right. Yeah.
So at any point, could you say, I'm walking down the street with my dog and it's not on a leash because I'm training it?
That's my
Yeah.
point.
Yeah,
that's
I mean, is that
the
really?
potential.
Yeah,
Because I don't want that either, right?
well, that's what you're gonna have.
So your Anchorage
Thank you.
example is good though.
I
on
mean,
that.
that's the whole point of this. We had a
Right.
gentleman that kept getting stopped by the police because his dog was walking next to him on the sidewalk, and his dog is very well trained, and the dog's not a nuisance.
There's
Doesn't-
biking.
He also
Well,
had
one
a
guy's
leash,
biking, but I got another guy that's
Oh.
walking.
Oh.
So I got
Couple.
two things going
Yeah.
on here, but,
Yeah.
but my whole thing
that's
is,
everybody.
okay, I understand your dog is that way, but the next guy that's walking through town that has a dog walking next to him, and he could say, well, I'm training my dog, next thing you know, it bites a little kid and it's not on a leash. Well, okay, is that we have a leash law, we don't have a leash law?
I mean, that
I mean,
would
I'm
clearly
thinking of safety
be
of our,
a violation of
It's
this
a
ordinance.
violation of the other, yeah, right.
right.
So Chris,
It's a nuisance.
is
trying
that
to-
what you're saying, is that final sentence, we could put something like that in there to kind of counter it?
Yeah, I kind of liked the Anchorage language that you read. I mean, it does give a little bit more substance to what that means, and it did address the issue of, this doesn't apply to, just dog walking or something to that effect.
Yeah,
I think
it's-
that's the best part about it is we have a couple of examples of things that are not training.
Yeah, and we could
You can
pop
still
that
be
in.
real creative about what is, but
Right.
that activity isn't.
And they list all those similar items, biking, skiing, or walking off leash, it is not training.
Good. I'd vote for
So
that.
if that's a better definition.
Well, if you're interested in that, let us do a little more
Okay.
research. We'll come back with some better language about that issue, but it sounds like folks are comfortable at least having what's included in here stay in here.
Yep.
Yeah. I think so.
Did I
Okay.
give you my dog link stuff once? Every time? Okay, so you've got that link.
Yep.
All right. Okay, very good. Thanks a lot, you
Thanks,
two,
Sue.
for moving this forward and getting to the attorney and the sheriff and everything and getting that info. That's super helpful. Does this lead us to council reports?
Oh, God, I hope so.
Is that a volunteer to start right there?
Sure, why not? So I did library and the Y, sort of. I'll do library first. It was
It's
a very.
only 8:01.
I know. Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be quick. I'm just going to pick out the highlights. One of the interesting things, we had been working on our rules of behavior policy at the library, kind of trying to tighten them up a little bit so that crazy, wacky shenanigans don't happen quite so much, and when they do, that we have a way to enforce them. One of the things that came up is that we had put into our definitions of weapons, as we said, illegal weapons, which isn't really defined. Dangerous weapons are, but then in our discussion, we were realizing that, well, yeah, there are lots of people who, have long knives and things of that nature, and conceal and carry and that kind of thing. It's like, well, it's not that they have it, it's that that there's a behavior around it, like they're being threatening or whatever. So we came around to that and decided that we wanted to get some language around it so that that's clearer what we mean there, that we do want to say something about weapons, but we want to say it's specifically tied to behavior. So that was one of the more interesting things that came up. And then the other thing was microfiche. That's right, their microfiche machine is finally giving up. And they're going to have to either replace it or go digital. I know, really.
Please, how soon could they?
Exactly. So digital is what we hope will be happening shortly.
Yay!
Should we bring the microfiche down to the Historical Society?
There you go.
Should we make a video?
We
on
finally
how
got-
my speech works for all the kids who don't get
How about a film
Oh my
strip?
God. Yeah, a film strip. With a cassette tape. There. So good. And then we did have a couple of people at the meeting, just a follow-up from the drag story hour. Just a couple of people wanted to show up and say thank you for doing it. It's great, Seems like it went well-ish, and it started a good conversation on both sides, people for and against. So yeah, overall it was good, and that was that. And then the why, I was trying to get in there. I don't like Teams, I can just say that. Like, we were using Teams to do our
It's mediocre.
meeting anyway, and I just could not get my audio to work. But I did hear everything, and mostly it was a recap of like what we are, why we're all together, all that kind of thing, and setting up our, now going to be monthly meetings that will be recurring, just so that we can all get up to speed, get reconnected, understand what's going on. I did have a personal conversation with Emily directly about the log rollers, just trying to find out more information, because I wasn't really familiar myself. I had the emails and those exchanges, but I didn't really have any my own information, and she basically told me the same thing that she had already told the log rollers, and that their insurance would not deal with the fact that they have log rollers. And just said that it would be super expensive, that there would be lots of issues around it. And then, she said, and there's timing issues and things like that. I mean, not that those hadn't been worked out before, because obviously the log rollers were there. It wasn't entirely a satisfactory conversation. It did seem to me, and I don't know if the log rollers have been reaching out to other members of the Y cast there, but I'm going to reach back out to them and suggest that they do, so that it's more than just one of the members of that committee who are talking about it. Because I agree that with you, Mayor Benson, that it seems like something we should pursue and something we should do.
They reached out to us, and then of course to Dave Mills at the county. But you're right, I don't know bigger. And then we got that last letter from their regional director, I believe, and he gave examples of other communities that are still able to do this, and apparently can handle the insurance. And I wasn't clear if insurance was the only issue, if there was something else so I had to make any
Yeah.
comment till I knew what the issues were, but
It's, I mean, that at
seems like we
least-
could still work on this.
Yeah, it does seem like something that I think could use more work, and, maybe, Emily feels like she's done with what she can do, and that's fair. Maybe it just needs to go up the chain of command there, which I'm not sure who that next person is, but I'll find out,
Okay, thank you.
and that's my report.
Cool. One of the things I believe I've mentioned before is I would like to see the viability, thinking of all the storms we've been having, and over the last 5 or 7 years, I've had multiple tree incidents, and we know we have birch trees that are dead and dying. We have a lot of those pine trees have been around forever. They're big and they fall over, and sometimes only in half, and the whole deal. So I met with Elena Hansel. She got 2 foresters from out of 2 harbors, and I asked, what could we do? And Shane Steele, maybe have some kind of a community program where we could assess our trees in this community, see which ones are unhealthy, maybe at the end of their stage of life, get some help to get them out of here, help people plant some new trees, what would be good trees for us to have considering climate, get some diversity, and not just trees, but bushes, wind blocks, the whole deal, and just get some foresters in to help figure out with individual homeowners on their property and do all that. So they were super helpful for that first concept idea. Is this feasible? Yeah, obviously big cities do this, including 2 harbors. Apparently one of the April Wallstrom's class a few years ago already did an inventory of the trees in our town as one level. But they said the first thing you would do is do an inventory assessment, and then you could start looking at, you can also get youth groups, get funding for youth groups to come up and do a lot of the work. And you'd have to do messaging and marketing, of course, campaign to awareness and the whole deal. So she said we have about 4 or 5 months to put together a project plan, and this would be something that would probably take like up to 3 years because Soil and Water is already booked through 2024. But it's things other communities do, and it might be a good thing for our community. It would go into stormwater and all sorts of things bigger than I even envisioned. I look at that along with utilities going into people's homes, like getting more people to bury their individual lines too. And part of it that it got me thinking is we have so many people who don't live here. And then when they do have an emergency, they don't know who to contact about anything, including my next door neighbor who's had 2 in the last 5 years. And they aren't here. And if a tree falls in your neighbor's house and you live in the Twin Cities, that's not going to be as easily remedied or whatever, or even on your own house. So that was part of what's hitting my brain of things like that. So we'll start kind of plodding along on that and see where it goes. She was very excited, by the way, that the city reached out with the project with Soil and Water. So that was nice. EDA, it's been busy. They're still working. So as you may have read, HRA board and the EDA board both voted yes to a merger. It was set on our agenda for April 12th for a presentation by Steve Serba and Mary Somnus to review the concept. And I don't believe there would be an ask for a vote from the city at that point, but now there has been a very recent budget issue, so that may not appear on the 12th. I just found that out the other day. So that's where we sit with that, and I think part of the question too is what the makeup of the new board would look like. And I don't mean by people, but we have 4 put on by the county and 3 put on by the city, and then how would that work? There's been lots of thought around that, and of course it's state statute, but yeah, it's been interesting conversations of where would this mean. Stacy Hawkins said, well, if it's a brand new board, do we just like reset totally? And do we have different ideas of how we put people on the board, or I don't know. So another really cool thing, if you haven't heard about it, there is a lot of federal money to be available by the federal government and then pass through for the state funding through the Inflation Reduction Act for communities that are in transition with their energy. If, for instance, a coal-fired plant was the most common one. So examples are Becker and down by Stillwater, Oak Park Heights. They are already much farther along in this, but they were then given with their coal plants. They were given the land to redo, and they could put together a plan of how they wanted that. Maybe all commercial, maybe all residential, whatever. You put like the ammunition plant in the Twin Cities. And we have that same option looking at us with Tack Harbor. And there'll be a lot of money to support whatever we would like to do down there. It's not the city, of course, but so that'll be a really big project and probably a lot of it's been an ongoing conversation. This isn't new. Schroeder's quite aware of this, and so that's something we'll be working on through the EDA. We had a lot of interest in that, and I think it's kind of cool. I sort of remember when Tack Harbor, was make a circle around it, and you're influencing Silver Bay, Finland. Not just Cook County, right? And then around.
It's 2,000 acres.
Yep.
But
And
Minnesota Power has to clean it up, from what I
Yes.
understand, yeah.
as far as they know, now they're going to do that in 2024. Have they removed all the coal or just part of it?
Most of the coal's gone, but to clean up the whole site will be a major undergoing.
So they're committed apparently to that, but the next step is Pat Campanaro, as the interim EDA director, is getting a meeting set up with Minnesota Power just to make sure we're got the stats on that where they're at. So
Yeah.
that's huge. We met with a woman from the state who will be doing a lot. It's her office that handles that energy transition, is her department. And she gives tons of material to read and some webinars and all that. So kind of find out what the federal, it's a combination of grants, matching grants, total grants, lending, a lot of variety of financing. Coast Guard, I met with someone who is in NOAA, has a lot of NOAA experience, and also a Sea Grant to get ideas about possibilities with the Coast Guard station if it eventually would land back on our way that way. I also, Katie Clark from the Historical Society has said that they are kind of moving in a different direction, not what they had thought through about, what was that, 5 years ago? 5, 6? I've lost track.
Me too.
When they last talked about museum and whatnot at the Coast Guard station. That said, a gentleman from the state had reached out to them thinking about, there's another designation, oh boy, historical designation or historical preservation that might be beneficial for that area as well. So I said we could sit down and meet and just hear. He gave materials and info, but those are the next steps around the Coast Guard. We're still waiting to hear from buyers, right, to get a title opinion. And that's just one of the next steps. And then we're going to have to start really making solid contact, I think, with the U.S. senators and their assistants, just to kind of, we'll need their help to see where this Coast Guard station lands and make sure it does not land on the GSA site. Because we just don't know. And then the East Harbor, there's been landowners, of course, concerned because of various storms and storm erosion. So we're setting up a meeting with them just to open, listen, first steps, just hear what they're at. And I think some are maybe taking some action, have an engineer. We don't know.
Different folks that are different levels of action on that, yeah.
Yeah. And then Robbie from the county is going to come, and then Elena Hansel is going to come as well from Soil and Water. So it'll just be a listening session, see kind of where everyone's at and what their concerns are. That's that. Yay!
Nothing.
Well, Aaron?
Well, I had a meeting with the Arrowhead Animal Rescue, and we mostly talked about getting the packet ready for the council to see. That was mostly what it was. We talked about finances a little bit, where they were financially, and we talked about some possible fundraising that they would be doing, like the brick and some of the fundraising, they put cans around town in places. That's really about all that we talked there. And then this one was a while ago at the Active Living and the Steering Committee. We talked about funding for, or getting funding for the Gunflint multi-use path going around the sheriff's station over towards the horse corral. They're about 60% done with the applying for grants and getting funding for that. We talked about they've applied for habitat restoration along the Gitchigami Trail. They won't know more about that until May. We talked about there's a gravel issue along the Gitchigami State Trail right near Fall River Road. And I talked to Mike about this, and it's out of city jurisdiction, but there's the grade there is during the spring with the water flow, it kind of puts all the gravel down there. They have two things. They're partnering with the schools to have kids go down and plant some trees to try and keep that up there, but that won't be something that they can, it won't really take big effect until later on, so they're looking to get somebody to clean that up. And then, where'd it go? Oh, there it is. We talked about age-friendly initiative / community. The AARP has this age-friendly initiative that they're trying to get around, where your community is built for everyone, not just certain amounts of people. Like, you can easily walk around. You don't need to own certain things to get around. And they were talking about the county is applying for that status. So that could be something that we could look into, maybe. And the Safe Routes to School bike fleet is going to get worked on at the school. And also there's a bike radio going on the 25th of May, and they need volunteers for that. So, yeah. That's it.
Thanks.
I'm next. Had two meetings. This morning we had city had a safety meeting, basically. On the agenda coming in April, they're gonna bring a truck up here with fire hydrant cutout, and we're going to, are they actually helping us with the fire hydrant
Yeah.
flushing? Okay, we're gonna start, we haven't done this in a long time.
Systematically, I doubt we've ever done it.
I don't think we've ever done, because I know it was on the fire department, we talked about doing this, and there's also a lot of talk, well, we better not do this because we don't know what's gonna break. So, I mean, now's the time to do this. We're gonna flush fire hydrants and flush our system, and we have a truck, we have spare parts, there'll be people that'll be able to repair and fix things as we find them breaking. Some hydrants are old. A lot of our hydrants aren't in too bad a shape, though, really. We have quite a few new ones.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work on hydrants.
Yeah, so
historically.
that's something new that's gonna be happening now, is getting the hydrants, hydrant training, and the fire department will be involved on the training of how to flush accurately, how to do it correctly, and so will city personnel. So it'll be kind of nice to get that done with everybody. Projects happening in our department. I know Jeff had talked about a automatic switch. I don't think we've talked about that at the PUC level yet.
No.
No, but that's something that he had brought up. Automatic switch that'll switch our power from main line coming into our generator. We're one of the very few places that have a manual switch, and we're just looking at a safer way to switch, make our switching going on there.
Who pulls that switch?
Whoever wants to be.
Our line workers do.
Whoever wants to be under 69,000 watts of power, we want to get to it.
It sparks.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's kind of safety meeting information. We did have a Parks and Trails meeting.
on the 28th, and let's see, a lot of it was carryover from the previous meeting as far as Snowmobile Club fundraising, the local Snowmobile Club in Grand Marais has now, I think by April 1st, they'll have the pull tab and the video gaming and that kind of stuff at 2 locations, the Birch Terrace and the up yonder, the old Harbor Light site. Though that'll be a fundraising, part of their effort for fundraising for the club. We did also talk about the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trail Commission. There are 2 available seats on that for Northern Minnesota, and Linda kind of threw her application in the ring for that, Linda Simons. There's still another seat, and I don't know if Shane was going to do that, but his name came up. And the reason why we're thinking about this is there were a couple of bills that got passed, or we don't know if they got passed yet or not. We're trying to figure that out. We're looking into that, but things happen down there at the state legislature when all these bills are coming through, and it's nice to have representation there. Otherwise, things happen and then you're after the fact. And something that may have happened on these 2 bills, and we don't know if they got thrown out or not, but there were 2 bills that got passed, and they may or may not cause some restrictions on trails, motorized trails we currently have that may be sunsetting and disappearing, stuff like that. So that's, and, you know, the whole conversation is kind of like, well, you know, where we live, next to the boundary waters and massive amounts of state and federal land, is a little different than some of these other places that are managing parks and trails. And so sometimes these types of legislature may not, it might be okay for some areas of the state, may not be okay for some of the others. So I mean, we're just a lot of emphasis on we need some representation on that board. And Linda's gonna start it, and hopefully we get another person. She won't probably, I mean, she said it'd be a temporary thing, but at least if she gets, it's a governor appointed position, so it hasn't happened yet. So hopefully we get her on there, and that helps in the future. What else did we talk about? Well, the Taconite Harbor thing came up as a discussion. The commissioner member brought that up. Other than that, that's about it. Well, no, the lady from Trailbreakers, Sharon, she's a go-getter, that lady. She wrote a grant for $300,000. They're trying to replace that bridge that got washed out over the Poplar River, and that's an expensive ordeal. So they're trying to get a grant to get that repaired. They've got money from Lutzen, put up matching funds, but you know, it's like a $400,000 bridge or more. I mean, it's a huge expense.
Okay, so there's several on the Poplar River, right? Is that
Well,
what you mean?
this
This
goes
is
across.
which one?
This goes across the Snowmobile Trail that actually feeds down into town, into Lutzen.
So this is one lower, like on the lower end of the golf course?
I don't know exactly where
You know
it
what I
is.
mean? I don't, because the snowmobile trail's low, right? It's not very far
Well,
up.
it's the state. Well, no, this
this
isn't the state. This isn't the state trail. This would be Trailbreakers. Well, it's not the.
Not the one I see
It's
going
not
up
the
the Ski
state,
Hill Road?
so to speak, trail. It's
Oh.
maintained by the Trailbreakers.
I just,
The state pays them to groom it, but it's
Sure.
they're private.
because there's that lower trail that I see crossing the Ski Hill Road. I just wondered,
I don't know
because
exactly where
there's
it
several
is.
bridges that have to be
It washed
repaired.
out when they had that big
Yeah.
Poplar River thing. So, and now when you go to replace some of these older bridges, the new specs are, okay, well, that bridge is not gonna work. If it's a 30-foot bridge, now it's gotta be like a 50-foot bridge. So new specs and,
So it's not the one that they have to repair for the golf course?
no.
No, okay. And then the ski hill has to repair one then, and of course the resort has to repair theirs way at the bottom.
Yeah.
So this is one more then?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's too bad. I mean, I'm not sure why some of this FEMA money, I mean, it washed out a lot of bridges in there. I would think that there would have been emergency money to be used for some of this, but apparently it's not used for all of it. Or it's not used for this anyway. Anyway, that's all we had on that agenda. We're gonna skip next month and have a meeting. Next meeting will be May 23rd.
All right. Any updates, Mike?
I think we'll find a different time to share activities.
Okay, you're on definitely next time then. All right, and with that, I believe we are done. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
This was a good meeting.
Thank you. Have a good night.